I'm really glad to be here tonight. Really nice to see all of you. Wow, this is a lovely gathering. You know, they say that poetry is dead, and up in my neck of the woods, it may be on life support, but down here in Ventura, with all these blood donors, you guys, it's in good shape. Okay, so I like to, maybe unlike some poets, when I begin a poetry reading, to kind of let you know what it is I'm up to and what I'm going to talk about tonight. This book has, as Marcia hinted, many different threads. And the thread I want to look at tonight is something to do with kind of an inner dialogue that I've been having ever since I was about 3 years old. And, you have these conversations with your significant other. Is the glass half full or half empty? And you're always the person who represents the half empty side, when the question gets asked. And one day I sat down with a half full glass of water, and I asked it to tell me, was it half full or half empty? And what I learned about myself was that for me, the glass is either almost totally empty or overflowing in the extreme. So having had that conversation, I realized that there are two portions or two sides of my personality, which I gave names to because, I'm a critic as well as a poet. And one of that sides is I call the derelict nihilist or nihilist. I'm not sure how you pronounce that on the one side. On the other side is the unreconstructed romantic. And what a mix. I know. They don't get along very well. But as soon as I named them, I remembered, do you guys remember Norman O'Brien? Love Against Death, right? His great tome. And but of course he stole that concept from Freud. Oh God, I'm losing my voice. When he, who talked about Eros and Thanatos, the love and death in Greek. And but as I've come to realize, you could think of them as opposites, but don't do that. Think of them as parts of the same process, which we sometimes call life, but really is something much more complicated. So when I've realized that even in the deepest satieties of love, the great unraveling of our life continues, love and death. We start with the whole fabric, but by the end, we're left with not even a thread. And except at the end, there is no we or no I, and the thread is now part of someone or something else. Hello, Doug. Hey, how you doing, buddy?
Can't see it, but I'm a little late.
That's okay. I'm just warming up. Okay, so whenever I start thinking about this stuff, I get a headache, give myself a headache. But I hope not to give you too much of a headache, even though I am going to kind of follow those two threads, love and death, through the book. So let's begin at the beginning, as they say, with the first poem in the book, which is called Adam's Bastard, and which is a rewrite or a reimagining of, that old story in that other book. Adam's Bastard. After Adam made his break, and who could blame him for tiring of perfection, he began to tire of his mate. If she wasn't sweating all that stooping and gathering, she was constantly apologizing. He had his own regrets and didn't need hers as well. It slowed his reflexes, made him thoughtful, timid, clumsy. Either hit the saber tooth smack in the ribs or watch your javelin sail into an impenetrable thicket. One day he came across tracks he'd never seen before. Some 5-toed bipedal creature had been walking near the lakeshore in an inch of volcanic rain. Hefting his club, strong enough to crack the skull of any megatherium or glyptodon, you're familiar with those, he set out after his 2-footed prey. It didn't take long to run her down, a small, shambling, ape-like creature who, despite her hair and limited vocabulary, reminded him of someone, not himself, of course, but maybe his talkative, long-suffering mate. He liked it that she didn't say much and that he didn't need to waste a lot of effort getting her attention. He liked her direct, friendly way. He imagined it had something to do with his superior height, his large muscles. She kept touching his pale skin as if she couldn't understand why he was so naked. So he let her live and subsequently sought her out, although after the day's hunt, he always returned to Eve. Once or twice, he even shared his kill with the creature. He called her Lucy, or maybe that's what she called herself. In his old age, he could barely remember. And the baby, it had his face, but her skin, her sturdy, load-bearing gait. He named it after her. Lucifer, of course. A little nod to Don Johansson, and I stole a lot of that from. Okay. You may or may not know that I was raised in I'd like to call it a narrowly religious environment, circumscribed by homeschool and church. And those were all institutions which, in my experience, preferred the rigidity of death to the spontaneity of life. My earliest struggles with that narrowness and rigidity are reflected, I think, in the following poem, which I call A Habit of Ascent, which is, again, a kind of nod to Darwin, because he did, the descent of man and all that kind of stuff. Okay, A Habit of Ascent. Welcome. God, this crowd keeps getting bigger and bigger, and I love it. You guys are so great. You're really into poetry, and I really appreciate that. Okay, Habit of Ascent. Childhood, the first eternity. As I wandered our vast acre, trying to escape the sun. This was St. Louis, and it was hot as hell. How lonely it seemed with no children nearby, just my sister, an insistent mouth at mother's worried breast. Catalpa trees fanned their leaves like ants, trying to save their powder from streaking. No clambering into their narrow laps. The pear oozed like a teenager, craggy with acne. Its bark, a magnet for columns of ants. I circled the firs and stroked the knees of elm and oak, giants in conversation as the wind riffled their hair. Only the apple tree was short and broad enough for this restless climber. Its cool fire surrounded me as I climbed into flowered lace and huddled in the second crook, watching leaves, then apples, sweeten on stems, here where the trouble all began, in the garden of the heart. At night, I dreamed the whole miracle again, an explosion of green branching into darkness. And yet, I wanted more, some escape from what I was, from what my parents wanted me to be. Come morning, I drape myself along a limb like a python, inhale the husky perfume, stroke the swollen fruit, as if this had always been my home. You can save all that good stuff for the end, and applause, cheers, and that's good. That's good. Okay. One argument for religion is that I was raised Catholic, by the way, and I spent 5 years in the Roman Catholic Seminary, for those of you who are interested in that sort of biographical detail. One argument for religion is that it provides consolation for life's greatest challenges and disappointments, death being chief among them. Death, of course, is not just the great equalizer, but the great awakener. This next poem, which I call Sudden Harvest, attempts to stare directly at the various lessons provided by the death of a close relative. Sudden Harvest. One August, bagworms. I don't think you guys have bagworms, but in the Midwest we have bagworms. I'll describe them in a second. One August, bagworms lit my father's evergreens like Christmas lights. Thousands of gold cocoons, simple materials, needles and something like spit to hold them together. He told me to get outside and pick them off the bushes. I see myself standing there, hesitant, a tin pan dangling in my hand. What was I thinking? The nuns at school were always reminding us of the pains of hell, the fire, the darkness, the worms that ate but did not consume the sinner. Or maybe I was thinking about Aunt Marge in her beautiful cherry box, cushioned by velvet on all sides. The worms would be halfway through the wood by now. In less than a year, there'd be nothing but holes. When my father came out to cut the grass, he yelled at me. I remember that, above the roar of the mower, so I started. The heat, like a fur coat turned inside out, the sweet smell of clipped grass, the choking smoke. The pods were sticky, prickly. As I worked, I saw the inchlings crawling from their sleeping bags like kids waking at camp. When the pan was full, he took it and told me to come with him out back to the trash pit where we burned newspaper. I loved watching each sheet as it blackened, curled, and revealed the unburnt page beneath just before it caught. But not this time. When he poured my little captives onto the charred ground, shook gas onto them, I thought of the priest at High Mass, sprinkling us with holy water, and lit them like charcoal. Oh, they curled too in the sudden heat, blood smoke rising sideways in the pit. What must he have thought, seeing me staring, fists clenched, the moisture boiling from my cheeks and eyes, trying to read that fiery script? All right. Like many of you, my ancestors came from medieval Europe, a time and place haunted by death, as is my next poem, which is called Stoicism for the Masses.
Thanks for the context.
Yeah. They all need context, you know. I mean, they're in the poems, but, you know, if you only get to hear it once, which I hope you don't, because I have them for sale. Yeah. Okay, Stoicism for the Masses. Who needed money when all you had to spend it on excuse me. I can see the problem that Elton John must have doing 300 shows a year. This is my 10th reading this year, and already I'm losing my voice. No, another one. Magic cough drops. Whoa.
Oh.
Ooh. This looks like that good Afghani ganja, you know? Relief. Who needed money when all you had to spend it on were indulgences or the wishbone of a saint? We were always trying to wake into summer, even during winter's slush and chapped melancholy. In a world filled with false positives, suffering was the only synonym, a knotted cord, a beauty mask of ashes and spit. We're crouching beneath trees, hiding in canebrakes, sprawled in pools of water, wishing that the thunder of cavalry were just thunder. It's the 13th century, and people are expert at dying. We've studied tauntology, bravery being nothing more than stepping from behind a shield and meeting the enemy's spear with your chest. In 600 years, the descendants of our cruel and merciless Lord will crush organized labor, cruelly and without mercy. A century on, they'll marry us, thankful for their partner's rugged energy, compliment to their own nifty education and sense of style. But for the moment, thornbirds sing cheerily, hidden in blackberry thickets, and children tie one another to trees. They're playing heretic and inquisitor. The rest of us cheering the warmth of an imaginary fire. That poem appeared in a local rag called Miramar, for those of you who are interested in such things.
You're handling the thing in the mouth pretty good.
Yeah, well, it's really helping, so I'm not going to take it out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That got
I hope it doesn't clash with my dentures too much. Well, okay, so much for the death part of love and death. Let's look at love, and see, if that turns out any better, okay? Here's a little sonnet-sized poem, okay? Sonnet means that you have to really pay it close attention, okay? I'm not going to make it easy for you this time. It's called Foil. Foil? What could that possibly mean? I still don't know what the title of this poem means, but it's called Foil. I ride the long arc of the freeway through West LA, the low, bland shops and houses flexing in the heat like mats of algae, distant hills and towers wrapped in petrochemical gauze. I'm thinking about love, the way fishermen on the pier must think about their tropical homes, the shacks and shanties filled with children, the carbide-tainted waters teeming with fish every color of metal. Has the pollution of their dreams been slow or quick? I catch the glare off a taller building, that hospital, and am nearly blinded by the memory of a girl's copper hair. Okay, so that was kind of me at my most wistful. Poets get to be wistful, don't they? Even big He-Man macho poets like me. My daughter's sitting back there and she's laughing. What is he saying? He's not like that at all. It's a joke. It's a joke. But you knew that. Okay, so this is a little more boisterous, can I say. As you might have guessed, I lived in Los Angeles for a long time. And for the last part of that, I lived in Culver City. And there's a really tacky, tawdry, shabby strip mall on Sepulveda near Jefferson, and which is where this takes place, this poem called Lip Service. And you could think of this as a persona poem. This is not quite me. We poets get to do that too. Lip service. Our little crowd of smokers huddle under the awning outside the tattletale room, our Abel's offering of syntax and tobacco rising into the drenched and chilly air. At the other end of the parking lot, beyond Big Lou's toys and collectibles, beyond the aquarium, the Korean cleaners and kamikaze comics, the partisans of the Scarlet Lady are swapping lights and jokes before returning to the serious business of pouring a lifetime's sorrows down the hair-clogged drain of their neighbor's ear. My ex is there, I'll bet, and her new beau, a beefy former cop turned security consultant. I think his name is Jeff. They'd be laughing by now, and she'd be telling him for the 33rd time all the ways I failed her. She likes to tell the story of her life, each boyfriend or husband forming a chapter, all of them starting with lust or jealousy and ending in disaster. I've heard earlier versions dozens of times, and even the latest more times than I'd care to count, the last time in court. She's good at getting people, even judges, to feel sorry for her. I did, even though I had my own tale of woe, which I shared like a wandering minstrel with whoever would listen. At least I used to. I used to think I was self-destructive because of what Dad did to Mom, or what Mom did to me, but now I know that I like booze and cigarettes, not just because they help me forget. Standing in the rain with the other hardy hackers, I enjoy watching our puffy red faces bobbing like balloons against a backdrop of asphalt and rain. It gives us a reason to be here in the cold and wet, while dads with takeout and kids holding baggies filled with goldfish scurry like roaches to their cars. Nothing's better than that last puff when the nicotine is densest and you can almost feel the glowing tip sear your lungs, holding it in as you crush the butt into a grimy paste and head back into the bar. I think technically that's also a barroom ballad. I like to kind of mix my genres, you know, it keeps things interesting. So that was love foiled or frustrated or never existing, but sought, you know. The search for love, you know, is the thing that keeps us moving on, you know. As, who was it? Johann Wolfgang von Goethe used to say, die ewige Weiblichkeit zieht uns hinan, which I had actually inscribed in my first wedding ring, which means the eternal womanly draws us on. You know, he's a real romantic too, but you knew that. Okay, so something I came to realize, or experienced at any rate, is that even when you're not looking for love, love is looking for you. And so I offer this next poem as a kind of proof of that truism, insight, I don't know. It's part 3 of a poem called Naked. And you should know that it takes place in an imaginary country which no longer exists, called West Germany, which means it was many years ago. After a night of dancing and beer, an almost endless night, sundown at 3, dawn at mid-morning, we went to the sauna. Not my idea, and even though it offered a chance to see the women naked, I had no desire to let others gaze at me. But still, I went. Don't ask me why. I couldn't face my empty room or what I'd bring to that cold and functional space. I was an asteroid flying through the vastness of my life, all interaction at a distance. It was that or catastrophe, wasn't it? After showers, we met in a large, warm pool, staving off drunkenness with the crawl or breaststroke, the bodies pink and pale, muscles loose now after the cold. The sauna next, dry heat sucking moisture from lips and nose, and then the hot tub, breasts floating like aquatic potatoes, penises wagging like tube worms. By now, the beer had leached from our pores, and what was left was a warmth, something like love. And yet we were not done, but like our Neanderthal elders, we shuffled past a heavy wooden door and onto the garden porch, its railing heaped with snow. It could have been 25 or 30 degrees, but in the glow of our common bravery, we forgot the cold and listened to the silence gathered placidly above us, snow sifting out of the dark like sugar onto shoulders and hair. Two more. Another thing I realized, you go on one of these searches, you know, and you find out all kinds of stuff about yourself and about life. Maybe what we're searching for are not just bodies, but also a meeting of the spirit. And so I give you a mandatory, which is a portmanteau of the name Amanda and the word mandatory. This is a necessary relationship if you ever encounter someone like this. Don't walk away. I dreamed this up. This is not a mandatory. I met Amanda sketching a panda at the National Zoo. It was a bitter cold morning, colder than it ever gets in the mountains of China, where the panda's ancestors lived. But the panda seemed happy enough, chewing bright green bamboo grown especially for her, somewhere beyond the capital's sprawling suburbs and rushed to the zoo. If the panda had any idea of the immense effort spent on keeping her alive, she would have dropped dead of shame. Amanda was so absorbed in her drawing that she didn't notice me admiring it. It was the living panda, that was clear, but cobbled together from other images, a long-distance tractor trailer, nuclear power stations, storefronts, and national monuments, creating a panda mosaic whose form and texture were pure panda. Amanda herself, I now saw, was similarly composed of disparate elements: liquid aspirin, hair dye, tooth whitening gel, and thousands of other products the panda's grandparents had never imagined. But then so was I. Quote, "A remarkable unlikeness," I said, breaking the ice, warm air rushing from my mouth. She looked up, looked at me, then back at the drawing, as if trying to incorporate what I had just said into it. "Would you like me to do your portrait?" she asked. The rest, as they say, is story. Okay, and I'm going to leave you with my most Zen poem ever, where not only do love and death combine, it's not clear who actually wins. It's called Draining the Lake. And I had such a battle with the editors at The Sun, they wanted me to explain what the poem meant. You should never ask a poet what a poem means. You get, talk and disquisitions like I've given you tonight. I mean, you're probably just as confused as I am. Okay, so love, death, together for the first and maybe very last time. Draining the Lake is what it's called. Oh, and again, I'm back in Germany, and I'm meeting an ex-girlfriend. Like pilgrims visiting the tombs of saints, smoky hands of angels on our shoulders, we wandered the medieval city, stone churches and tall, half-timbered houses leaning over narrow streets. After lunch, we walked to a nature preserve where we used to meet 20 years before. Or maybe the only pilgrim was me, having flown a night and a day to visit my memories. She'd lived here her whole life, one day's dust settling on every yesterday, whereas for me that brief, vivid time was fresh as photos in an acid-free album. I remember her, still almost a girl, lithe as exposed wire, electrons ready to jump into my hand and burn through my body. Who had she become, who was once so hungry for love? All around us, the short, bright summer was having its way with things. In dappled shade, we walked beside the 3 lakes at the center of the preserve. From the air, they might have looked like the chambers of a heart, pumping the valley's blood into the river, which surrounded the town like a moat. The ducks, not so wild that they hadn't grown used to handouts, guided their little families in tight formation, like convoys on the lookout for U-boats. In my country, they might be dragging the water for the body of a gangbanger, or else one of the lakes would be drained, and workmen in waders and gas masks would be collecting milk cartons, beer bottles, old tires, and a mountain of plastic wrappers. Here, they don't throw trash in the lakes, at least they pretend they don't. Here they let bodies sink into the mud where the worms can do their work. There's those worms again. I could almost see myself on the bottom of the lake, slowly decomposing, but alert enough to notice the oddly matched couple staring at the surface. Maybe we'd always been wrong for one another. How could anyone understand my habit of going in the wrong direction? I seemed immune to the usual sorts of happiness. I seemed to thrive on mistakes. How else explain how happy I'd become? Thank you.